back to the Shock Absorber podcast, and my name is Joel, and joining me here on the lounges is Tim. Welcome. Not the Train of Destiny today.
No, the Voyage of Victory.
Voyage of Victory. Yes, I like that. Voyage is a good word.
It is a good word.
I enjoy
it's a fun
it.
word.
It just, we talked about Master and Commander a few weeks ago, and it just makes you think you're setting off on a big ship and you don't really know where you're going to discover new lands.
Yes. Not my personality. I think
You wouldn't be doing that?
No, I don't think so.
What would you be doing in that Napoleonic Wars time?
Probably running a small parish church somewhere.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I like that. Not a botanist or something?
Botanist. I did, maybe it was a Rest of History episode about Joseph Banks, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere in my mind I've got a kind of like, I want to know more about Joseph Banks, that whole botany and classifications. So yeah, maybe you've pinned me.
Oh, so
like a botanist pins a butterfly.
Oh, wow. Good work. It is fascinating how they used to like study animals or flowers, plants, whatever, and actually draw them. Like some of those drawings and illustrations are magnificent.
I did an assignment for uni. I did first year biology and we had to collect specimens and pin them to a board. The problem was that they had...
boring.
Well, I mean, it was fine, but they had switched the semesters around when you did what subjects. So before I had got to this subject, they used to do this subject and this assessment during springtime when there's lots of bugs out.
Yes.
But they had changed the subject. They kind of switched the timetable around, which put this assessment for us in the autumn leading to winter.
No bugs.
And not a lot of bugs around. And they did say, oh, sorry, we didn't really notice this, but here we go. And that was the only concession.
So what bugs did you end up finding?
I've got no idea. This is 20-something years ago.
Don't reveal your age on the podcast, Tim.
Oh, sorry. This was 2 years ago.
This is
my first year of university.
This is evergreen content.
Evergreen content. Yeah, I don't remember. They had to go, just collect bugs.
Really?
And classify them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of evergreen content, I just showed you a video.
You did. It was very green.
Real Madrid, yeah, it was, wasn't it? Of a couple of football stadiums that have removable pitches.
Yeah.
And you were very excited by that.
Blew my mind. I had no idea that this kind of engineering feat existed.
Well, the first time I heard about it was the 2002 World Cup.
Okay.
I think in Korea, Incheon, I think they had a stadium that was a full dome, but they were worried about it not growing properly. So they created it so it would roll out to be able to be in the sun, and then it rolls back in to be able to be played on.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so these videos, check the links in the comments below.
I'll put them in.
In the show notes, sorry. In the show notes. Fascinating that such an engineering feat. I had no idea. Heard about retractable roofs, heard about retractable seating, but to move the entire pitch underground or to have multiple pitches. Was it Tottenham? Was that the one that had the two...
Like they moved one out.
They moved one out and they took the soccer pitch out and they put the NFL pitch up.
Well, I think what this is, one of the reasons they do this now is that to fund stadiums, but also to make them appealing, is to be able to not just hold sporting events, but also hold things like concerts.
Yeah, right.
In that example you talked about the NFL have been playing in London for quite a while. They've played at Wembley, but since Tottenham built the stadium, which they say is probably the best one in England nowadays, they have been the host of the NFL games that have been played there.
Okay.
And so with that, as well as things like concerts, they want to make it a venue when they build these new stadiums that will generate revenue outside of the football seasons as well.
Yeah, of course.
And so, but one of the problems you have though is you have to have a grass pitch that if you are putting multiple concerts and other events on, it will damage the surface.
Yeah.
So they want to create a way where they can have the pitch undamaged, but also be able to hold those events. I think in that example of the NFL, they still bring the pitch in, like they didn't have that standing around. But the Tottenham one is they just roll it out into the car park, which is insane. They just broke it into pieces and roll into the car park. Real Madrid's, on the other hand, is underneath the stadium.
Yes.
And it's just one, what would you call that? One long shaft. It's 100 meters long, but they break it into pieces and shuffle it down. I think that's to do with what is it? Not, I was going to say cartography. That's making maps. What's the
geography?
Geography or something else. I feel like there's another word. Anyway, but there's something to do with
Topography?
Topography, maybe that's what I was thinking of. The way the topography and everything works in Madrid is that they had to do it that way to stack it rather than just roll pieces out because of what was around the stadium as well.
Yeah. So yes, mind blowing.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, the reason we got onto that though, was because I'm reading a book called Fear and Loathing in La Liga, which is by a football journalist by the name of Sid Lowe. And it's on the rivalry between Barcelona and Real Madrid.
Yes. Now I'm learning not just about football, but also about Spanish politics and nationality and geography even.
Yes. Exactly right. And it's based a lot of the political turmoil prior to the 1930s. So we've also we know about that in world history in terms of after World War I, there was a lot of political turmoil in many countries in Europe. We've seen that in Germany. We saw the rise of fascism and communism in Germany. It was similar in many other countries around Europe and Spain as well, where the Spanish Civil War was based on that. And the Spanish Civil War was Francisco Franco was the dictatorship that arose from a fascist dictatorship. And what I'm learning from this book, and I knew it to a certain degree, but what I'm learning is the political turmoil has determined the rivalry between these two clubs. And I would consider it the biggest football club rivalry in the world. There's a lot of other rivalries that are based on success or location. So I'm a Liverpool supporter. One of their biggest rivals is Man United. And basically the only reason that one of the main reasons they are such great rivals is they're both in the northwest of England, but they're both the two most successful clubs in northwest of England as well. And there's kind of maybe a little bit of it's working class versus working class in a sense.
Yep.
But even if you look at Argentina, which has Boca Juniors and River Plate, that's a class. River Plate is considered a higher class than Boca Juniors, which is the working class.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's elements of that in Real Madrid, Barcelona, but there's also the political ideologies also wrapped up in the different regions that belong in Spain. Like Barcelona is in Catalonia, or you're considered Catalan when you come from there. They have a different language. But Franco, for example, tried to rub out those languages through torture, killing, what would also say, like regulation.
Sure.
And so the reason that these two clubs are such great rivals, and the game is called El Clasico. It's called the Classic. And also has, because it's Spanish, has a lot of South American support as well. So there's this whole thing wrapped up, and I'm learning about it more. But the funny thing is, and this is what this book is about, is that it's much more complicated than we think. It's like Barcelona left, Catalan, Real Madrid right-leaning, conservative establishment. Its funny thing is that Real Madrid was actually had its first president was a Catalan, but Spanish, because the club Real Madrid was started in 1902, but as the Spanish Civil War in the 30s kind of aligned Real Madrid to that club, Barcelona, which had been taken over by the dictatorship. It was like, we're against that. Because I remember reading a quote from Michael Reiziger, who was a Dutch player who used to play for Barcelona. He played for them for about 5 years, I think. He said that when you play for Barcelona, you are not just playing for a football club, you're playing for an identity.
Yes, okay.
And a Catalan identity, because they still speak the language there. There's a big push to have Catalan independence from the rest of Spain.
Okay.
And the other thing I thought was interesting, and you might be interested in this because obviously your family heritage is from Germany, is I was wondering, you know how those European countries kind of formed from unification of a number of kingdoms?
Yeah. Yep.
In Germany, which I believe is in 1871, I think, they unified all really quickly, but the Spanish independence has been a slow merging of all these different kingdoms and different marriages between royal people and stuff. So it ended up being this monarchy, and that's what the coup from Franco ended up overthrowing. But then that was returned after. I haven't got to the bit where we've returned to a non-dictatorship yet. Okay. So that's my summary.
Yeah. So what's happening with soccer during the war? Like, are they talking about Does that come up about whether they're playing matches in the middle of the Civil War or whether it's being postponed? Like, what's the interaction there?
So more after it still represents what happened afterwards. So you have the Civil War. Franco is successful in overtaking large swathes of the country.
Yep.
I think they didn't play as much during the war, but there was this time of that when the war was over. Franco's regime said, you must align with our sporting government regulations and things like that. And so what Barcelona were concerned about was, you're going to take away our identity. We have to, and we're against obviously what you've done to the country. So you're going to take away what we actually are representing. So then they started to figure out, how do we divulge ourselves of this club so they don't take it over, but it still exists. And there was a whole lot of toing and froing about that. But then the real thing was that there was then a match that happened, I can't remember, it must have been in the late 40s. No, 46, I think. And Barcelona went to play Madrid in Madrid and they lost 11-1. Like a huge score. And so there was also this thing of like all the Barcelona players were whistled. So in Spain, if you're a player or a coach who, gets the ire of the crowd, they'll whistle you.
Right.
Because instead of booing, they'll whistle.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's quite interesting.
With a whistle, or would like just whistling?
Like how they people put two fingers in their mouth and whistle, which I can't do.
No, I can't do either.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We're fast forwarding time a little bit, but once there was a game that I watched live, and Ronaldinho, who played for Barcelona, absolutely destroyed Real Madrid, like with scoring 2 goals himself, I think, and I think they won 3-0. But there was this other thing that everyone in the stadium pulled out white hankies and wave it around in terms of a surrender, like basically, you're too good for us. And these were Madrid supporters, basically saying at the end of the game, I don't like, why do so many people have white hankies in the first place? But there's this footage of them waving white hankies going, almost like we surrender.
Wow. Yeah.
So there's all these, but see, that's a kind of related to the Civil War again. There's this, and it's very hard to describe, and I'm probably not doing it justice, but it's what I love about football is because it's such a game of the people. It's such a game that's so accessible.
Yeah.
Anyone can play football.
Yep.
You don't have to be a certain size, a certain weight. Anyone can play football. You've got you use jumpers for goals, goalposts, and you just need a round ball. And even in places like Argentina and Brazil, they just basically have one big sock and stuff it full of socks, and that's a ball.
And it's make do.
And so as a result, football being the world game, it's used for better or for worse to highlight what's going on in a particular cultural context.
Well, and you can tell the history of the world through different, as you say, different clubs and rivalries and conversations and things like that. So yeah. I mean, I picked up little bits of German heritage by just a little bit of commentary that I'm trying to read on Bundesliga, but in particular towns and rivalries and those kinds of things. Just, and sometimes it's an East-West thing, sometimes it's a North-South thing, sometimes it's a Protestant-Catholic thing. But it's interesting that you've got these telling the world story, history of the world through little microcosms of rivalries, and it's
well, even like in the Bundesliga, the Dortmund-Schalke rivalry,
right,
is because they're both from the Ruhr and the industrial region, and that's the thing, especially in Germany and places like Holland and Belgium, companies started their own football clubs.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
And so it's kind of like, and that happened a fair bit in England as well. But it's this thing of who do you represent? Or I represent this company because I work for them.
Yeah.
And even Wolfsburg, which is a big part to do with the Volkswagen factory in Wolfsburg, is the same thing. But the rivalry comes from, you're on this side of the Ruhr, and we're on this side of the Ruhr, and we're like, it calls a thing about identity too, which I think is really fascinating.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I love Liverpool so much is because they formed this identity of we're set apart. not through just their success, but also the way that, in particular, Bill Shankly, the manager in the 60s and 70s, created an identity of that our fans are better than everyone else, and that we still hold on to that as Liverpool. We don't boo our managers like other clubs. We stick to our managers for longer than other clubs. We try and be respectful as fans, but we're really supportive. But when you come to our stadium in Anfield, like, be prepared, because you are going to get the full force of the cop, as they say. But there's a video you may have seen or may have not seen in the 60s where someone is standing in front of the cop, which is a large stand behind one of the goals, and it's so full of people. It's like fully swaying. You know how you get moved in a crush almost. But they're singing Beatles songs.
Right.
And that's our identity. Like, we know the Beatles is from Liverpool.
Yep.
Here's our identity. We're going to create as much noise as you can because we're in support of our team. So I think there's the thing that opened my eyes when I was probably like 13, 14 years old, when I started watching things like the Champions League, of like, there's all these identities and things about I can learn about the world through football.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions about Real Madrid Barcelona?
I don't think so. But no, it's as I say, it's cool to have learned those things. Things are always more than what they seem. You've got these tribal identities, national rivalries that exist, and understanding the history of those things and the complexity of those things, again, is just endlessly fascinating.
And as you said, you like complexity.
I do love complexity. Yeah. Yes, no, it's good.
The founder of Barcelona, for example, was Swiss. He wasn't even Catalan or Spanish.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing for, like, Liverpool, for example, was formed because people got annoyed at Everton. So Everton was the first club created in Liverpool.
Oh, right.
But people got annoyed. There was a dispute over the field. So they created a separate club called Liverpool.
Yeah,
and that's one of the reasons why Everton and Liverpool in the same city
have such a rivalry.
Literally, the grounds is literally separated by, or they were before Everton moved their stadium, but they were separated by 300 metres across a park.
Right. Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah.
But I do love that stuff.
Yeah. So one question I do have, because this is going to link to our main topic today, which is we're talking about metrics of success.
Yes.
And we want to think about social media, podcasting, what are the metrics of success in that kind of realm, and how to think about metrics of success as Christians. So my question here is, which is the most successful club, Barcelona or Real Madrid?
I think unequivocally you could probably have to say Real Madrid.
Okay.
In terms of league titles, they've won the most amount of league titles. They've also won the most amount of European Cups / Champions Leagues. So it used to be called the European Cup, and it changed into the Champions League 1992, I think. But they won the first 5 European Cups, which was started in 1950.
Wow.
But they also were able to attract a lot of talent from, in particular, Hungary and Argentina.
Okay.
So their identity, again, is also in, we are the successful club.
Yeah, right.
And also they were a very player-driven club. So not so much driven by a system or a philosophy, but we are a player-driven club. Even this year, Xabi Alonso, who played for Real Madrid, Bayern Munich and Liverpool as well, incidentally from the Basque country, from Real Sociedad. So that's another thing to talk about, is a region of Spain, another one that holds very, very strongly to its identity. He was fired because the players weren't happy with him trying to implement a system or a philosophy or that they felt limited by it. So basically he's fired in his first season within 4 or 5 months of being...
Right.
But that is the Real Madrid's thing. Like, if you compare it to Liverpool say we stick with our managers and for a long period of time, most of the time. Real Madrid will fire managers constantly.
Right.
They went through a period once where they had 5 coaches in 2 years or something like that.
Yeah, wow.
Which is insane. And really the stalwart...
Like Australian Prime Ministers.
Yes, to a degree. Really the stalwart of the club at the moment is the president, Florentino Perez.
Okay.
Who back in the late 90s caused a huge storm between Barcelona and Real Madrid by signing one of Barcelona's best players as part of his presidential campaign. So he said, I'm going to sign Luis Figo, Portuguese player. And then that was part of him getting his first term. He got voted out later on, and now he's back in but he runs this. It's almost like he's the manager. The amount of influence and power that he has, rather than the manager, which is usually the case for a lot of football clubs. So that's the first thing. Is that success, ultimate success, is the only real metric for Real Madrid.
Right.
Having said that, they're also in the Deloitte Money League, which kind of measures the revenue generation of clubs. It says here that they've generated over 1 billion euros of revenue in the last 2 financial years. The next one, though, is Barcelona in terms of money.
Right, okay. So if you were going to argue as a Barcelona fan why they're successful, what would a Barcelona fan argue is their metrics of success?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because if I was asked to choose between the two teams, I would always choose Barcelona.
Okay, well, here we go.
Well, I think because it's what they represent in terms of footballing philosophy, and also in terms of they're not always about the success. Now, everyone thinks that Barcelona has been like Real Madrid for a long time, but I would say that has not really been the case prior to 1992. Have you ever heard of Johan Cruyff?
No.
Probably one of the best players ever, but also one of the most influential players in football, because not only did he change the game as a player, along with his coach, Rinus Michels, which is in a form of football called total football. He then took over Barcelona and created a whole system from youth all the way through to the first team. He won their first Champions League for them in 1992 as well. And he won 4 league titles in a row as well. But it was bringing a philosophy of, this is a whole club philosophy, which Real Madrid have never really had. And I appreciate that. I like it that they stand for something like that. But that's very a Dutch influenced philosophy. But if you look at the success that they had later on with Pep Guardiola, where they won in his first season as a manager every title they could. So they won six titles. And it was the first time he'd managed at that top level. Pep Guardiola played under Johan Cruyff as manager. So there's this whole lineage. And then they also have a thing called La Masia, which is the youth, where all the youth are trained. And they're all trained in the same system. So as you go to they pride themselves on having a lot of players that come through the youth system. So that's why I like that. I like those things that they stand for. And they have a saying, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of Mas un club, something like that. It means more than a club. So we're not just a football club. We kind of say, well, Real Madrid are just a football club and they represent things that we don't agree with. We're more than a club. We represent the people, the real people.
Yes, okay.
So I think that's where there is this element of what success look like.
Yep.
Real Madrid have won the most amount of European Cups, I said, with 15, which is more than anyone else. And I think they're the metrics that we would probably, the main metrics. And there's a lot more, but those are the main metrics that I would probably measure them by. Real Madrid behave like that too. So they used to have a thing called, it was a philosophy that Perez brought in called the Zidanes and Pavons. Mm-hmm. So Zinedine Zidane was signed from Juventus, one of the best players in the world at the time. And they did this thing where they were buying lots of players, spending lots of money. But then they'd also have players that would be considered from, like, kind of trying to keep that Castilian identity. Okay. So they would coming through the youth system, but they weren't very good. So we'll just buy all these great players and then fill the spaces that we need to with Real Madrid youth products or Spanish players at the very least. And that's in contrast to, again, the Barcelona idea of, like, we want our youth, we want the majority of our team, hopefully, to be from our identity, and then we fill the gaps with players that we want to bring in. So a very, very different model.
Yeah, backwards.
Yeah. But how does that, do you think, fit with success in terms of, like, looking at church and things like that? Because are we just saying that you need to be successful in church, Tim?
Well, I mean, this is what we were talking about. What does it mean to be successful? We started talking about, before we started recording, the idea of algorithmic success.
Yes.
And are we winning the algorithm game? Joel, is the shock absorber winning the algorithm game?
I would say no. Not when we look at our numbers. I mean, unless the numbers are lying to us.
No. But yes, the question about what does success look like? So I asked my friendly ChatGPT how to get algorithmic success. on a podcast.
It told you.
Yes, it tells me lots of things.
I said he. It told you.
Yes, it's a tool, not a person. It spat out by its algorithm, optimizing for retention, creating early engagement velocity, title for curiosity, not description. Don't describe. Package for discovery, consistency beats virality, increase listener identity, and use short form as a funnel, drive reviews strategically, guest strategy, think in seasons, not episodes. And the real secret, you want to know the real secret, Charles? Here's the real secret.
Here's your secret to success.
The algorithm reward shows that people finish, people follow, and people return to.
So the algorithm rewards people finishing videos, for example.
Yes. Following and returning to.
Yeah, and they come back.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's the idea.
It's a battle that I often have in terms of the digital content that we produce is that number one is time, because only on 1 day a week. But the second one is what kind of content do we create that is God-honouring, faithful, abiding, like you've said before?
Yeah.
Compared to, like, we could get a lot wilder on this podcast.
We could.
If we wanted to. I mean, there would be some things on the cutting room floor that we probably should have, but we've made that conscious decision for a reason, right?
Yes. Yep.
And
chasing clicks, as they say.
Right. And that's the thing as a Christian is when you're creating content, it's almost like you have to create content because that is our world now. But also, how do you create this content that is, ethical, God-honouring, and not chasing the clicks, and therefore, like, making it a bait and switch or really just aiming for growth? Is it really as Bible-focused as we want it to be? Like, that's the thing that I've always in my mind. Now, there are little things that I've changed over time of, like, if it's on YouTube, how do we make the thumbnails better? Because that's how people click on it first. But one of the ways that people get people to click on thumbnails at the moment is putting swear words in it. I'm like, well, that's not something that we should do, right? Or at least saying something is this and blanking out the swear word, but that's going to be a swear word.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to think about that. I mean, I wonder if your friend, Mr. Chat, can help us with that. But it was a great conversation that we were just having with Hudson, who's on our team, one of the editors on our team. And he was saying he wants to get into more video content creation, but he's only young, he's only 20, he's only 19, 20. And he's saying, well, I want to be really careful of what do I create and how do I create it, and is it really the best thing I should be creating, especially as I'm a Christian?
Yes.
What do you think?
Yeah, and we've talked, I'm sure, in previous episodes about just the inherent virtue or lack of virtue on social media, and podcast would be kind of a part of that, I guess you'd say. Obviously, we don't think it's inherently unvirtuous because we're here recording.
That's right.
But one of the things so there's a bit of a history of evangelicals really wanting to use whatever means necessary to communicate the gospel.
Yep.
And even though we're doing more of a culture type podcast, talking about church strategy, we're not kind of we're not doing evangelism. We're not trying to do Bible exegesis here. We're not trying to or we're not trying to do hot take cultural commentary either.
Yep.
Like, let's talk about what happened in the news this week.
Yeah,
necessarily.
Let's get Trump's State of the Union.
Yeah, that's right.
Break it down about how Christians should think about it. Also.
Yeah, that's not the kind of the content we're generating. But again, we could get lots of clicks for that.
Yes.
And lots of traction for those kinds of things, because that's what generates a lot of the heat at the moment. What we're committed to is talking about the shock absorber. So our defining paradigm is about how do we help ourselves think well about church, and how do we help other churches think well about what they're doing, not always about the actual running of their 60-minute gathering, because clearly a lot of our conversations are not about that. They're not about shaping how do you make the best hour of your week kind of stuff. But it's about how do we think Christianly about culture and about the big trends. That is kind of where we're going for. And I think what is helpful there is to think about what are the what are the virtues that we're forming in ourselves, and that we're trying to form in the listenership and the audience that are listening to us and watching us on YouTube. And so when I think, we go back to our theology, strategy, practice paradigm. So theologically thinking about what does it mean to create? What does it mean to, I guess in this context, advertise, communicate those aspects of ourselves? And like most biblical theology, you want to start in the garden. You want to start with Genesis 1 and 2. And what's the mandate that God has given? And so there's the mandate that God gives to Adam and Eve in the garden. So Genesis 1, let us make mankind our image and our likeness, so they may rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock and all the wild animals and all the creatures that move on the ground. God blesses them and says to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. And commentators, from very ancient commentators through to modern day, have seen that not just as procreation and agriculture, but actually there's a cultural mandate that comes with this, or actually forming and the creative task of creating societies and communities, and what that looks like is really a key part of what's going on here. And like many things in the Bible, we see the distorted versions of that, where we see some of Adam's descendants in sin creating cities, or taking multiple wives, or being proud of the murders that they've done, and all sorts of things. So you see the distortion of that very early, but there's this cultural mandate. And so there's a sense where we are trying to do some of that, where there's a cultural mandate of creation, and in our modern world, content creation is part of that, that we're thinking about how do we create things that are of good and beautiful and true, and that we're putting out. So this trifecta of what is good, what is beautiful, what is true is a common and again, ancient Christian idea that these things characterize the virtues that God is, and therefore the things that we should be pursuing that are God-honoring and God-like. And so that's going to be part of how we think about the content that we create. Is it good? Is it beautiful? And is it true? Now, truth's an easy one to think about in terms of our age, because there's so much post-truth and truthiness and all of those kinds of things. There's
conspiracy theories.
There's conspiracy theories. There is, fake headlines, or clickbaity headlines that actually have nothing to do with what's the content.
AI videos now.
AI videos, yep, all of that kind of stuff. So it's very easy to be untrue. And so therefore for us to hold onto a virtue of truth, for our, however engaging the thumbnail or the description or the SEO optimization or all those kinds of things will be, they will always be true. So that's really key. They'll always be good. So we're not going to celebrate and revel in the muck. We're not going to intentionally generate content that is purposefully distorting, purposefully inflammatory. Yeah, absolutely. So we're thinking about things that are good and beautiful. So we want to actually create good art in a very, very broad sense of that term. And I know you've thought about the cameras and the quality of the microphones. You're thinking about the backgrounds. You're thinking about renovating this space so it's a more beautiful podcast studio. So all of those kinds of things add to this. But also there's a sense where, again, broadly speaking, stretching the term, but our conversations to be beautiful, as in they bring God glory and honor. They're good. So that's all part of what it means to actually create content that is going to be successful. So one of our markers of success is going to be this cultural mandate. Are we actually filling the earth and subdue it? Are we bringing, like we talked about last week, bringing order to the unordered and bringing redemption to the disordered, and actually therefore partnering with God in what he is doing? And are we conserving the ordered? So all of those things we talked about last week, if people want to jump back. And then, that triptych of good, true and beautiful, and holding on to those as the metrics of success. And so, tens of millions of subscribers when you're doing intentionally inflammatory or false content or truthiness, post-truth. When you're engaging in all of that, then there are worldly metrics of success you might be garnering, but are not going to be metrics of success that Christians are going to care about or ought to care about. So that's part of it. I don't know if you've got reflections on that.
No, I think you're right. I was just thinking about what would be, in a longer conversation, my answer to Hudson, who's posing that question. And I would say, well, it depends. I still think it would depend on what it is too. If he's creating content for a particular job, then he might just need to make it for how it needs to be to produce something. But I suppose a dilemma you would come across there is that, or how much is too much in terms of being a Christian, is like you might be making a video that just highlights someone's reaction, and then that might be okay. But then if you're creating content that is going to, that it's specifically lying or bringing someone in to actually turn it around and do something else, or then I wonder that what would you say as a Christian in operating in that environment? Because we know, we kind of had the word of chasing the algorithm dragon. That was the idea that we were coming across, was we know that, let's say, an Instagram or TikTok algorithm is purposely created to keep you on there.
Yes.
Because that's the only way the financial incentives for Instagram or TikTok increase. The longer that Tim or Joel is on using TikTok, and I don't even use TikTok, and I don't think you do either.
No, I've never been on.
Yeah. The longer we can keep them on it, the more we can sell ads or data, content to this person. And I think within that, there is something that we really need to grapple with as Christians, is that, for example, how much time do we spend on our phone? How much time do we spend being evangelized to by the content that's on our phone and of the world, compared to listening to God, for example? And I think that's a real battle, and I think it is one of the greatest battles as modern day Christians, is because I know a lot of Christians that still spend a lot of time on their phone. Now, that might have just been substituted for something else previously. What did you waste time on before then? We've always been... I remember this photo of like people used to say, oh, everyone's on their phones on the trains at the moment. And then someone put up a photo somewhere of like everyone just reading the newspaper on the train, for example. Yeah. We've always wanted to look inward.
Well, yeah. I mean, I get that. But at the same time... what was the quality of the content you're consuming? Yep,
that's true. And the level of looking at it for such an amount of time.
Yeah.
But you're reading a newspaper, you have some agency to that. And I think there's a flip in that in terms of being stuck on an algorithm, just going through videos. You can obviously stop, but it's intentionally curated and also designed to keep you on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a design element, which is highly disruptive to, and intentionally distracting, which is affecting so many things. It's affecting mental health. A number of people now are turning more. So I heard a Jonathan Haidt interview recently where his big book, The Anxious Generation, talked about the mental health of young people who have been grown up in this area. And then he said, actually, I've realised as I've written that and published it and now speaking on it all the time, that one thing I missed in that book was the attention deficit and the way that it's wrecking our ability to concentrate on things. So I didn't deal with that at all in this book, and I've realised that that's actually really significant. And there are a lot of good books on that. One called Indistractable, which is quite good. One I've just recently read by Chris Hayes called The Siren's Call. So there's a lot of these books that are coming out, sort of popular level, journalism type stuff, talking about the the attention economy and how it's trying to disrupt our attention economy. But it's also like this is part of that, my reaction to the newspaper thing, to be able to sit and read a newspaper article that was written pre-internet age was actually required a fair amount of reading literacy, the ability to comprehend arguments, to stay with an argument long term, to read long form pieces of content. So there's a depth of content quality there which we're missing. And I mean, it sounds snooty and snobby, but when I sit on the train and I look across at middle-aged men playing Angry Birds or flicking TikTok reels, I'm just like, my goodness, like there are so many other things that you could be doing right now, and this is how you're choosing to spend your time. It's almost like I can understand teenagers and young adults being sucked into this world, but the fact that it's captured all generations. And the professional class, the fact that you've got these professional class people who are going to real jobs in the real world, but playing whatever the latest, I mean, I'm talking about Angry Birds and I'm about 20 years out of date.
Clash of Clans is a big one at the moment. Clash
of Clans, whatever, all those stupid bubble games, whatever they are. It's like...
Careful, Tim.
But then, I mean, there's a widely quoted quote, that's bad English.
Have you not been reading the newspaper?
I've played too much Angry Birds. So Peter Drucker, he's a famous management guru, and his famous line is, "There is nothing so useless as being efficient, to doing efficiently that which should not be done at all." I'll say that again. There is nothing useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. And getting really good at TikTok, I think, is one of those things that ought not to be done at all, quite frankly. So when it comes to our content creation, like I don't know if we've got a TikTok account, we do content. Okay, so there we go. Yeah. Everyone should like and subscribe on TikTok and follow us and get all of our...
Yeah, you can't subscribe on TikTok, you follow.
Right, okay, we'll do whatever you should tick us on TikTok.
Oh gosh, that sounded like a real middle-aged man.
But I think there is a genuine conversation here about whether Christians should be engaging in the kind of distraction economy and attention economy, and what it looks like to not just create not the content in that, but actually question whether we should be engaged in that field at all.
That version of
content. So, and this is where I quite like Marshall McLuhan's idea of, I've lost the phrase, the medium is the message, which was taken up in Amusing Ourselves to Death and those kind of books, and sort of, Jonathan Haidt's picked up on some of this stuff as well, where it's not just whether the content on TikTok is good or bad, it's whether TikTok itself is actually something that we should be engaged in as Christians or not Christians. It's not whether you can have good Instagram content or bad Instagram content, or it's questioning the assumption and at least critically asking, should we be on Instagram at all? Should we be producing content for a platform that is actually intentionally doing this to our populace? I think that's a genuine question that I think we should be wrestling with as, largely as Christians, and whether you and your communications team think about that at all. But just even if you answer yes to, we should be putting some of our content on there, why? What are we doing that for? What is it trying to achieve? Is it not just the content? Is the content good, true and beautiful? But is the kind of virtue of the person who is there and the bringing people onto that platform, is the platform itself and all the things that it is doing for us good, true and beautiful? I'm not on a lot of these things because I'm old and I'm a fuddy-duddy and, but also because I know that I would be distracted. Like I've had plenty of times when Facebook and Twitter are the two that I've spent a lot of time on, and I have been addicted. I have checked multiple times per day. I've been on every half hour. You got to check and see what's happening, and like I have been addicted to these platforms, and I know what that's like, and I know that that is my worst version of myself, which is why I've been trying to cut out more and more and more of those things and try and be on there far less, which makes them far less interesting. And also, hopefully, I mean, the idea is that it reclaims more time for the good things. That's not always true. Sometimes, as you said, sometimes you can still find terrible things to distract yourself with, or waste of time. But yeah, it is, part of it for me comes from this question of what does it mean to be formed as a Christian? What are the spiritual practices? What are the spiritual characteristics? What are the virtues? I mean, it's a Greek philosophy word, but I think you can carry it across. What are the fruits of the Spirit that I want to be forming in myself? And is my engagement on these programs, platforms, helping me be more patient, helping to be more self-controlled? Is it helping me to be kind? I don't think I ever really got to a point where I was being angry or being shaped by that, but I could see others and I could feel myself getting angry that other people were getting angry.
I think the algorithms have got stronger in that too.
Right, okay,
Even
yeah.
more, bring you more into the one side of the, or your whole of the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah. And this takes us back to Real Madrid and Barcelona in terms of, you know, it creates a tribalism, and you have these identities which are strongly formed. And I mean, there's heaps of literature on this and heaps of commentary on this about how you're drawn into your little subculture. You're a Barcelona fan. How on earth could anyone ever think about being Real Madrid fan? That doesn't make any sense. Me and all my friends were all Barcelona fans, you know? And this is the kind of tribalism which we see. And largely at the moment it's kind of left-right politics or left-right theologically, as we talked about last week. At least, you know, as a Christian on there, that's kind of what I see. I'm sure there's other things. But the way that it is continually shaping us, I think we do have to question and come back to our key theme. What are these metrics of success? And if you're successful on one of these platforms, if you successfully win the algorithm, is that success?
Right.
Why or why not?
Yeah, and the dilemma is also, I think, that if we are to go out and be witnesses for Jesus, that if there are vast amounts of people on these platforms, then you're kind of like, well, we probably should be on it, shouldn't we? So like that's the other thing, and there are stories of lots of people, especially in Generation Z, and we've talked about how, for example, in the UK, there's this quiet revival. People are searching for something and they find things about Christianity and they want to go to a church. So they end up turning up at a church and knowing nothing about it. And there's documented reports of that. But then you've got this thing of exactly what you're talking about, is knowing it. There is probably more chance to be deformed by being on these platforms than formed.
Well, this is the classic. I mean, yeah, Stu talks about this in the 90s. It was, who's going to go to the pubs? We should go to the pubs. And so the Christians go to the pubs in order to,
evangelize.
I'm going to evangelize my mates by being a Christian in the pub. And very soon everyone's just at the pub and they stop going to church. And the pub has evangelized the Christian. Now, it's, Instagram. I've got to give you an Instagram. I've got to be successful in Instagram. I've got to, but again, is it the Peter Drucker example? Are you doing efficiently that which should not be done at all? And are you successful in something that you ought not to be successful in? Now, I don't want to have strong rules on this. I don't want to say it's always right, always wrong, because I actually don't think that there's a biblical mandate for any of these things. But I think
you're telling us we should shut down this podcast.
Yeah, we should shut down. This is our last episode. Thank you for joining us on the last episode. Feel free to email joel@chocolatedorvers.com.au, but you won't get a response because we're off email as well.
I've deleted that.
But I think there can be people who can navigate this well.
Yes,
and we'll navigate this well, and that's okay. But I'm not convinced by the argument that because this is where the people are, that this is where Christians ought to be. I don't think there's an oughtness to it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you think about the Roman Empire, it's like, well, all the people go to the Colosseum. So Christians ought to go to the Colosseum, so they should be part of the populace and actually know what's going on in the world and hanging out with all their friends, and maybe they can evangelize others at the Colosseum. It seems to be actually the case that the more the Christians lived amongst their peers but didn't engage in the activities of their peers was what drew that curiosity. And this goes back to a number of episodes we did 6 months ago when we were talking about 1 Peter a lot, about the giving an answer for the hope that you have. Largely that was, I noticed you don't go to the Colosseum. That's weird. Everyone does that. Why don't you? Well, I have a hope in King Jesus, and King Jesus has shaped me according to his Spirit to live a life pleasing to him and the upside down kingdom ethics, and therefore, blah, blah, blah. Not in those exact words, but they're the kind of conversations that come from not engaging. And part of this quiet revival, anecdotal evidence that seems to be coming out is a weird mix. Yes, people seem to be finding Jesus or finding evangelists or finding, gateway entrances into Christianity through their social media, and then largely gravitating to very ancient forms of Christianity that have not changed for centuries. So they're going to Greek Orthodox, they're going to Antiochian Orthodox churches, they're going to Roman Catholic churches that have not changed their liturgy for literally hundreds of years. And so they've, yes, it was great that there were Christians there in those spaces so that they could discover Christianity. But then there's also something really powerful about them having found traditions and things that are permanent and solid and through time. And it's interesting that during this whole quiet revival that non-denominational churches, sort of the soft, low church evangelical churches, don't seem to be the ones that are growing. The ones that are try to be on the cutting edge of culture, that try to be on the cutting edge of technology and smoke machines and lights and dynamic speakers, but it's the ones with strong liturgy, with strong heritage, with strong foundations, where people are still wearing robes, when they're still wearing funny clothes and holding funny artifacts and in funny buildings and
ringing bells,
doing candles, like these. That shift towards things that are tangible and ancient, I think is a good argument for also saying, as Christians, we don't have to engage in every medium. And actually there's something that people are striving for. And when the Spirit is at work in them and is starting to wake them up to what's going on in the world and their lack of their spiritual hunger, lack of spiritual food, that is what is satisfying them. And again, there's nothing inherently more Christian about candles and hymns and wearing robes in the service, but there is something solid and permanent there, which in a culture of impermanence has become really attractive. And this is the last part, maybe I think, of my biblical theology of thinking this through. I've got 2 more points, I think. One is the book of Proverbs is a really good example of how God's rhythm that he has built into the creational world works a lot of the time.
Yep. What a surprise.
What a surprise. Now, you then go and read Job and you realise that actually it doesn't work all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
So you need to read them together because otherwise you end up in sort of the life over God type thing we talked about last week. Yeah. That I just need to work God's system and then I can get the good results, and I actually don't need to include God in that process. So that's not what Proverbs is, because the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. So it has to be done relationally. But what is interesting is that what you see in Proverbs is you have this living according to God's rhythms that he's built into creation order tends towards success the majority of the time. And so when you see people pursuing the good, the true and the beautiful, you will actually find people who are more satisfied, who are more successful against certain metrics. They may not be the richest, they may not be the most subscriber, but they're actually, when you live, if your success and your subscriber and your income has come through living against God's good design and the rhythm and the grain of the universe, then ultimately that will be unsatisfying.
That's a very interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. So there is a rhythm of the universe that God has built into creation, and Proverbs helps us to see that when we live according to that, a lot of the time that turns out for our benefit and for our good. Now, the counter to that is firstly Job, that it doesn't always work out that way. So that's a great counterpoint. But the other one is, this side of the cross, Paul in 1 Corinthians saying that the wisdom of this world is foolishness to the Gentiles and those who don't believe. So we also have to recognise that actually living for Jesus will sometimes be really attractive, like Peter seems to suggest, that people will question you, hey, what is this hope that you have? Tell me more about that. But sometimes it will also be the stench of death. And sometimes you will be criticised and ridiculed and hated by the world. And you're going to preach on this in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Because we will be seen as foolish and we're seen as fools. So until new creation, we live in this in-between world where, yes, living in line, in sync with the grain of the universe that God has set into creation will lead to particular successes and will lead to a flourishing life. And yet at the same time, because we are battling against the world, the flesh and the devil, there will be opposition to that. And there will be times when actually it won't lead to success in worldly terms. And it will be seen as foolish. So not chasing an algorithm, not being controversial for controversy's sake, not using blanked out swear words in your YouTube thumbnail. All of the things that ChatGPT is telling me, chase all these things. If they're not good, they're not true, they're not beautiful, they're not in line with the grain of the universe, and they'll be ultimately unsatisfying. And so it's balancing those in this mixture of this created yet fallen, redeemed but yet restored world. That's where we live.
As you were talking there, I thought of the fact that we have a number of times talked about how, for whatever reason, church has become more like the world. We've made church more like the world because we think that will be more appealing to other people. And often our argument is, no, we are called to be countercultural and be different. So we spend lots of time together at church rather than just the hour. You drive into a nice car park and you're here for an hour and then you go home and do the things that you want to do. And it's kind of, where is the appeal? Why would people who don't know Jesus be excited to live differently or interested in living differently when church is seen as just the same?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that argument also applies to the digital content we make as well. Is that, are we just doing the same thing that the world is doing, or are we showing that we are trying to live for Jesus through our content? I think that's what we try to do on this podcast, for example. It's same with the Chip Lunch podcast that we do. We're trying to say, well, even Chip Lunch's stories of Jesus changing everything. We're trying to say, what do we look at on the shock absorber, especially things that happen in culture? How do we grow the church in partnership with Jesus when everything is changing around us, and it is constantly in a social media world? How do we partner with Jesus in order to do that? And I'd be interested to hear like what you think about how do we maintain that balance, or is it just, like we say, we like to be long-term, low-key relational. I think this podcast that we've had right today is we try and live that out, but in a podcast format. Yeah. Is that, do you think, like, let's go back to that question that Hudson answered. Is that the kind of thing that, or the biblical advice that we would give him? As we say, the older saints in the church give the younger people biblical wisdom when they're seeing what's happening, changing in culture.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. So is doing more YouTube shorts and those kinds of things, more content, it's not long-term, low-key or relational. So inherently, social media is not long-term low-key or relational. However, we might discover as we, we're thinking out loud here on the podcast, right? Yeah. We might discover that no, but what it does is communicate our vision and values in our community to people who might have an opportunity to, if they're local, come and try it for themselves, or be convicted to take some of these principles and go further because they've heard about it on a short form content, and then they're going to go and try that community base in their local church. Yep. And so in that sense, it could, so, there's an advertisement, there's a semiotic, there's a communication device there. So there's a whole field of communications theory that kind of could play into that and sort of argue that we're doing that well. So that would be true. I had another thought as well. Oh yeah, so my other thought was that there's a whole field called missiology, so how to think about missions, which I'm not an expert in by any means. But a key concept there is the idea of contextualization. And so what those who specialize in missiology and think about contextualization are thinking is, how do I communicate the gospel so that I don't lose the truth of it, I don't lose the conviction of it, but I'm able to communicate in a way that the people I'm trying to reach will understand it. So and I mean, the obvious bad example is, going to a completely different culture and just trying to run a church service in my language that they don't understand while I'm wearing my clothes that is different to theirs, and paying no attention, just go, no, the Spirit will work, God will call who he wills, I believe in predestination, so I'm just going to preach here in English to people who don't understand English, in my jeans and T-shirt in a group who are wearing whatever they happen to be wearing, and I'm just going to trust that the Spirit will call whoever he calls. And I think that's obviously naive and not at all what helpful, effective ministry is like. So there's an obvious bad example. The problem is, again, like anything, it gets complex and it gets grey. And somewhere in that middle is, not contextualising all the way through to making your church look like a pub, including beer taps and everything. And actually, maybe even you don't even know you need your own church. Just go to the other pub and just sit there and do church in the pub without really talking about Jesus, but trying to have Jesus-like conversations. So, well, that's not really church either. So somewhere in that messy middle, we're trying to think, who is likely to come to my church? So you always want to start local. Who's in my suburb or my urban setting or my rural county or whatever your demographic is. I mean, in an Anglican system is pretty easy because we have parishes. So you've got a geographic boundary. Who's our parish? Who is it? So knowing census data, knowing what languages are being spoken, knowing what household makeup is, all those kind of things will help you contextualize. And then you can communicate in a way that approaches the needs that they have. The challenge is to be able to still challenge them and say, Jesus is calling you in a way that you can understand, but also brings you into something better. So this idea that, Jesus calls you as you are, but he doesn't leave you there, like kind of those Christian cliches. So that you can respond to Jesus, you can respond to his message. It's simple enough, it's clear enough. And if we communicate it well, you can receive it right now, how you are, where you are, whatever stage, age, problems, etc. you have. But Jesus is never satisfied in leaving us there, because no matter how good, bad, whatever you are in terms of our worldly metrics, he calls you to be holy, and he calls you to be his child, and he calls you to be mature into the fruits of the Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit and into Christ-likeness. And so there will always be that challenge as well. So I think what we need to work out well as churches is to think, how do we listen to our community and our culture? How do we understand them well, listen to them? I mean, part of the shock absorber is also responding to them, letting them help shape what we do, but also with the maturity, the strength of those who have been Christians for a long time, who have studied, who have maturity in Christ. And so the flexibility of your culture, the strength of your eldership, coming together and trying to do community together in a way that communicates Jesus clearly, never compromise on the gospel, but also contextualizes well for the sake of people hearing the good news about Jesus and being able to respond.
And I suppose we can apply that to online communities as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes it that. I think that's a more nuanced way to look at it in terms of just don't do it or do it. I think and then you could be scrabbling around trying to, we'll just have to try and hijack the algorithm and try and get some audience. And I think that's where we try and go with our content. It doesn't mean we always get it right, but we're trying to. I mean, if you look at our audience numbers, they're not gigantic, but they have gone up recently. Thank you to, I think, for two reasons, to your other podcast that you're on, Cross-Formed Kids podcast.
Like and subscribe.
Yep, and we had Kanishka Raphael, the Anglican Archbishop of Sydney.
Hot guests, that was one of the tips.
Hot guest. Oh, we have hot guests.
Guests.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Use the guests well.
That's what we did, yes, that's right. So with all that in mind, we've talked about kind of how to think about at least creating digital content. And we talked a lot about Barcelona Real Madrid, probably too much. I apologise for everyone that got a bit bored of my football chat, but come talk to me if you didn't enjoy it. What's the takeaway, Tim? I'm not even going to say it's your favourite segment anymore. We just know it is. What's your takeaway? What do you want people to take away from this episode?
Well, I think it's good for all of us I mean, most people who listen to this are part of churches who are seeking to communicate their message, both the message of Jesus and the distinctives of their church out to their community. Yeah, and both those are healthy things. So how do you do that? Well, you want to make sure that you are keeping in line what is your metric of success. To think about not just the content of what you're saying, but also the medium through which you're saying it, what those medium platforms, what are their strengths and weaknesses. I don't think any medium is inherently evil or wrong, but you do have to think critically and carefully about how you communicate, why you would communicate. And there's also a freedom just not to as well. And this is coming out again from the quiet revival statistics. The people who are gravitating in, the Greek Orthodox Church is growing, not because the Greek Orthodox are on YouTube. There weren't Greek Orthodox TikTokers who were trying to communicate. It was people coming to Jesus and then finding. So growth and success, which we would say, good metrics. Church should be growing, people becoming Christians in your church, joining your community, success. Then they didn't have to be on the platform to have achieved that. So also don't stress about, you've got freedom not to be.
Well, God's in control.
God's in control. Yeah. If you've got capacity, these things can be wise. They can be helpful if used appropriately, if you keep the right metrics in mind. But also you've got the freedom not to be. You've got the freedom just to preach the word faithfully week in and week out, to love the incarnate people who are in front of you. And actually, particularly for those of us who are in paid pastoral ministry, that's our responsibility. Our responsibility is to be shepherd of the sheep in front of us, not being good social media stars.
Good way to end it. Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome.
It's been enjoyable. Thank you to everyone that's been listening or watching. We really appreciate it. If you would like to be part of the conversation, email me, joel@shockersorbit.com.au, and we will read it out on the podcast. But also, only if you just want to put a comment on our YouTube channel, that would be unreal. We could put it under the video, and usually I respond to that as well. So do that. But for now, we will finish for this episode for this week. Thank you again, Tim. And as always, we finish with a one way.
One way.